I didn't cry at my father's funeral. Not out of some tough guy nonsense. I just couldn't. The tears weren't there. Not even when the casket lowered into the earth. Not when the pastor talked about a life of service and sacrifice. Not even when my aunt leaned into me and whispered, "He was so proud of you, Alex." I nodded, because it was the polite thing to do. But something about that whole day felt wrong. Like I was standing in a movie version of my life. All the right lines were being spoken, but none of them felt real. My father had always been this solid, dependable presence. Quiet, proud, a little intense. He wasn't affectionate, but he showed love in practical ways. He helped me finance my truck, hired me onto the company straight out of high school, gave me tough feedback when I needed it, and a firm handshake when I earned it. No, I love yous, but always, "You've done good work." That meant something coming from him. We were close in the way men sometimes are, side by side instead of face to face. Working on things together, rather than talking about things. And I thought I knew everything there was to know about him. What mattered, at least. I was wrong. 3 days after the funeral, I got the call from the estate lawyer. I was expecting it to be routine. Probate stuff. A formality. I was his only son. No siblings. My mother passed when I was 16, and my father never remarried. Everything was supposed to come to me. We'd even talked about it, vaguely. "I'm leaving you the company someday," he told me once. "You've earned it." I thought that moment, maybe 6, 7 years ago, was a turning point. A confirmation. The unspoken promise finally said out loud. So when I walked into that law office with its dusty wood panels and faux leather chairs, I figured it would be simple. Go through the documents, nod a few times, sign where they needed me to. But the lawyer, a thin man in a navy suit named Collins, didn't look at me like someone about to deliver good news. He flipped through the stack of papers in front of him, cleared his throat, and said, "Mr. Reed, before we begin, I just want to prepare you. There are some unexpected details in your father's will." I remember the way he said "unexpected." Like he was bracing for a punch that I didn't yet see coming. He started reading. "To my son, Alexander Reed, I leave my love and my hopes for his future." That was it. That one line. No assets. No percentages. Not even the house I grew up in. Everything else, the business, the house, the savings, the investments, even his classic '68 Chevy truck, was left to a man named Elliot Cross. I blinked. Who? Collins hesitated. "Elliot Cross is listed as your father's business partner. He's the sole beneficiary of the estate." My father didn't have a business partner. Not one he ever mentioned. The company was family-owned, small, hands-on. I knew every name on the payroll, and I'd never heard of an Elliot Cross in my life. "He didn't have a partner," I said. "There's no Elliot. You've got the wrong person." But Collins just turned the will around and pointed. Elliot's name was there, in my father's unmistakable handwriting. Signed, notarized, and dated 8 months before his death. It felt like the ground under me had cracked wide open. I went home in a fog. Sat on the edge of my bed for what must have been 2 hours, just trying to remember anything, that might explain this. 8 months ago, my dad had started slowing down. He'd had some blood pressure issues, and I remember him canceling a few meetings, taking more time at home. But he never seemed worried. Never once said he was preparing for the end. And he definitely never mentioned rewriting his will. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. The company's filings. Property records. Old emails. I was looking for this Elliot Cross. Anything that would prove he existed, or didn't. That's when I found it. A contract from 5 months ago, on company letterhead. Signed by my father and co-signed by Elliot Cross, under the title, Regional Development Consultant. I didn't recognize the address listed below Elliot's signature, but it was only a couple hours from where I lived. A lake town. Quiet. Not the kind of place you'd expect to find someone who just inherited a 7-figure estate. I couldn't sleep that night. My head was buzzing, heart pacing like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. At one point I got up and started pacing the kitchen. I kept thinking about what it all meant. About what kind of man my father really was, because clearly, he wasn't the one I thought I knew. So I got in my truck the next morning and drove to that address. The road to the lake town was mostly 2-lane stretches, winding through woods that were still dusted with the last patches of winter. It was early spring, but the trees hadn't come back to life yet. Everything looked bare. Exposed. Fitting. The address led me to a narrow gravel road just past a faded gas station. At the end was a blue craftsman-style house. Neat. Well-kept. Porch swing. A few wind chimes stirring in the breeze. I parked across the street and waited. 10 minutes passed before someone came out the front door. A man in his 50s. Clean-shaven. Wore glasses and moved like someone who had grown used to silence. He had a mug in one hand, a stack of mail in the other. I knew, instinctively, that this was him. I stepped out of the truck and crossed the road. "Elliot Cross?" I asked. He froze, coffee halfway to his mouth. "You must be Alex," he said. My blood went cold. "How do you know who I am?" He sighed and set the mug on the porch railing. "Because I watched you grow up." He said it like a confession. Like something he knew would land hard. And it did. I took a step closer. "What are you talking about?" "I'm your father's first son," he said. It was one of those moments where your brain just stalls. Where it hears the words, registers the sounds, but refuses to make sense of them. "That's not possible," I said, even though I knew that didn't mean anything. Elliot stepped aside and motioned toward the porch. "You want to come inside? I'll tell you everything. You deserve that." And against every instinct in my body, I followed him. His living room was warm and simple. Worn couch. Books stacked in corners. A framed picture of a woman on the mantel, I assumed his mother. There were no signs of a family. No wife. Just him. He handed me a glass of water. I didn't drink it. "I was born in 1971, he began. "Your dad was 21. My mom was 23. They'd been dating for a couple years. She was in school. He was doing odd jobs back then. Still trying to figure things out." He paused, looking out the window like he could still see it. "When she got pregnant, he panicked. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. That it would derail everything he was working toward." I swallowed. "So he left." Elliot nodded. "Said he'd help financially, but couldn't be involved. My mom moved 2 states over. Raised me on her own. And he never came to see you. Not once. Until I was 25. That hit me harder than I expected." Elliot leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "But he sent money. Every birthday, every Christmas. A card. Always the same handwriting. No return address. Just, from Dad." For a long time, I hated those cards more than anything. I stared at him, my thoughts racing. "So what changed at 25? "He showed up at my door," Elliot said. "Said he'd been thinking about reaching out for years, but didn't know how. That he regretted walking away. And you just let him in." He gave a sad smile. "I didn't slam the door, if that's what you mean. We talked. A lot. He was older by then. More tired. Said losing your mom shook him. Said it made him want to repair old mistakes. I couldn't process all of it. I didn't even know where to start." "You're telling me my father had a whole other life, and never said a word to me about it?" "He was scared," Elliot said. "Of hurting you. Of facing me. Of admitting he failed both of us. That's not an excuse." "I know." We sat in silence for a few minutes. My thoughts kept jumping, my childhood, our Sunday mornings, the summers we spent fixing up old tools together. Every memory now had a crack running through it. "I worked for him," I said. "For 10 years. I was going to take over the company. That's what he told me." Elliot's face tightened. "He told me the same thing." I looked up. "So why did you get everything?" He hesitated. "I didn't ask for it. He said he had doubts about your ability to lead the company long-term. Said you were good, but soft." I blinked. "He never said anything like that to me. He said he didn't want to hurt you. But he was worried you didn't think big enough. That you were too cautious." "Cautious?" I scoffed. "I ran 4 major builds in 2 years. Brought in the city contracts. I wasn't cautious, I was careful. I'm just telling you what he told me." The anger rose in my chest like fire. He should have told me. Not whispered it to someone I didn't even know existed. Elliot didn't argue. He just nodded. "You could have warned me," I said. "Before he died. After. Any time." "I wanted to," he said. "But what would I say? Hey, surprise, you have a brother and he's taking your inheritance. You'd hate me." "I still might. I wouldn't blame you." When I finally stood to leave, he didn't try to stop me. Just gave a tired nod and said, "You deserved better." So did I. I didn't reply. I drove home in silence, hands clenched on the wheel the whole way. At one point I pulled off onto the shoulder and sat there in the dark, staring out at the woods, wondering if this was what my dad had felt like all those years ago, lost in a decision he couldn't take back. The first thing I did when I got home was pour myself a drink. I'm not much of a drinker, honestly. But that night, I needed something to help me sit still. To slow the thoughts crashing around in my head. I just kept thinking about my father's voice, the way he used to say, "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Alex." Or the way he handed me the office keys that first time and said, "Someday this place will be yours." It felt like someone had dubbed over my memories. Same images, new audio. None of it made sense anymore. He wasn't just a liar. He was a coward. I went back to the company the next day. I thought about not showing up at all, about walking away, letting Elliot run the place and deal with the mess. But then I remembered what my father used to say about loyalty. Even if it ain't yours, you take care of what's been handed to you. I didn't want to take care of Elliot's company. I wanted to protect what little of my father's work still felt real. But things had changed. The energy in the office was off. Quiet, strained. Trevor, one of our most experienced site managers, barely looked me in the eye when I walked past. Linda from payroll gave me a sad smile like I'd just lost a family pet. People knew something was up, they just didn't know what. Or maybe they did. I kept things professional, focused on my projects. But behind the scenes, I started watching, really watching, what Elliot was doing. He came in a few times a week, sat in on strategy meetings. Started taking calls from clients I'd been handling for years. He didn't ask questions. Just made decisions. The worst part, he was good at it. Sharp, calm, confident in a way that made people want to follow him. He had this way of making you feel like he already knew how the conversation would end. And yet, something about it all felt too clean, too smooth. Like he wasn't just leading, he was orchestrating. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Trevor. He was waiting outside a diner 2 towns over when I pulled in. He'd already ordered coffee for both of us. Black, no sugar, the way he knew I liked it. I didn't want to talk at the office, he said. Too many ears. About what? He slid a manila folder across the table. The North Shore job. That was one of our biggest bids from last quarter, a government contract to renovate 3 municipal buildings. I'd spent weeks helping put together the proposal. Measurements, logistics, cost estimates. We'd sent in a solid bid. But we didn't win. Another firm, Eastwell Contracting, beat us by a narrow margin. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Losing bids was part of the game. But when I opened the folder, I froze. Trevor had gotten a look at Eastwell's proposal through a contact in city planning. And their numbers weren't just close to ours. They were identical. Margins, estimates, even the buffer percentage we'd added at the last minute to account for supply chain volatility. No one outside our team knew those details. Unless someone had leaked them. Someone inside gave it up, I said. Trevor nodded. That's what I thought too. At first. But then I started looking at Eastwell's structure. Small outfit. No real presence. Just popped up 6 months ago. But the name attached to the business license. He tapped the folder. David Corman. My stomach dropped. Corman had been my father's accountant for over 15 years. Retired a year before the funeral. Said he wanted to spend more time fishing. Apparently, what he really wanted was to start a shell company. And you'll never guess who's been seen having lunch with him twice this month, Trevor said. Your new boss. Elliot. Trevor nodded grimly. I'm not saying he set this up. But something stinks. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting all the lies I'd been told in my life. The ones I knew about now. And the ones I probably never would. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the garage. My father's old tools were still in a wooden chest near the wall. I opened it and ran my fingers across the handle of the saw he used to let me hold when I was little. His initials, J.R., were still carved into the grip. It hit me then, all at once. He didn't just give Elliot the company. He gave him the means to gut it. The moment he handed over power without telling me, he gave Elliot permission to rewrite the rules. To reshape the legacy however he saw fit. And now, Elliot was using it to build something else. Something in the shadows. The next morning, I called Elliot. We need to talk, I said. Face to face. He didn't ask questions. Just told me to meet him at the same diner I'd met Trevor in. He even offered to buy me breakfast. Like we were catching up. When I walked in, he was already at a booth, sipping coffee and staring out the window. You know, I said, sliding into the seat across from him, for someone who claimed they didn't want the company, you sure found a use for it. He didn't flinch. I figured this was coming. I know about Eastwell, I said. And Corman. I know the North Shore bid wasn't lost. It was stolen. Elliot sighed. I didn't set it up. That was your father's idea. That stopped me cold. What? He asked me to start a secondary company last year. Said it was to protect certain assets. Reduce tax liability. Corman helped structure it. So Eastwell was his? On paper? No. But in intent? Yeah, it was part of his plan. He wanted options. And you just kept it going after he died? Elliot met my eyes. I didn't want to lose the momentum. Your father laid the groundwork. I just followed through. With Corman. Behind everyone's back. While pretending to lead his company. Elliot didn't deny it. Why? I asked. He looked down at his hands. Because he never gave me a real role. Not when he was alive. He let me into his world, but only halfway. This, what I built with Eastwell, was my way of making sure I didn't get left out again. You already weren't left out, I snapped. You got everything. On paper, he said again. But not in the ways that mattered. I left without finishing my coffee. I didn't report him that day. I didn't even confront the board yet. I just went home. Sat in my apartment. Thought about my father's voice. My mother's old photographs. The house I grew up in. And wondered how long a man could live a double life before it all caught up with him. You'd think the worst part of being betrayed is the moment you find out. It's not. The worst part is what comes after, when the weight of what's been done starts pressing in on your life from all sides. Not like a bomb going off. More like a slow leak in your roof. Drop by drop, day by day. Until you realize you're standing in a house that's rotting from the inside out. That's how it felt walking back into the office after confronting Elliot. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong, that I'd misunderstood something. That Elliot was just another son caught in a mess our father created. But I couldn't shake what he said. Your father laid the groundwork. I just followed through. And maybe that's what hurt most of all. Not just that Elliot had stolen from the company, but that he did it using my father's blueprints. A few days later, I got a call from Trevor. You sitting down? He asked. Just about. I think Eastwell's been laundering bids through 3 other projects. Not just North Shore. Same patterns. Same estimate structures. The timing lines up too fast to be a coincidence. You think Elliot knows? Trevor hesitated. I think Elliot is the pattern. That was it. The moment something in me hardened, I hung up and drove straight to the building where our board held quarterly meetings. It was a plain beige structure in a business park across town, nothing flashy, just functional. I'd sat in that room 100 times over the years. Never once felt like it was mine. But that day, I walked in like I belonged there. There were 3 board members still involved, 2 of them longtime associates of my father, 1 newer. I laid everything out on the table, the Eastwell documents, the bid data, the business licenses linking back to Corman. I didn't have the whole picture, but I had enough to raise questions that couldn't be ignored. I'm not accusing anyone yet, I said. But someone is using your company, my father's company, to funnel contracts somewhere else. And if you don't look into it, the city will. They said they'd review the matter. That's boardroom speak for we'll circle the wagons and hope you go away. But I didn't. The investigation started quietly. Not a public scandal, just a soft internal review. One of the board members, Diane, pushed for an outside audit. She'd been loyal to my dad for over 20 years, and she didn't like what she was hearing. Elliot, to his credit, didn't fight it. He stepped aside temporarily, said he welcomed transparency. Wrote a company-wide email saying this was all part of building trust in a new chapter. It made people like him more. But I saw the shift behind the scenes. The way people started whispering again. The way Trevor got passed over for meetings. The way I stopped getting invited to project calls entirely. I was being squeezed out. And I knew it. So I made a decision. I cleaned out my desk one morning while the office was still quiet. Left my badge on the table. I didn't tell anyone, not even Trevor. I just left. And for the first time in a long time, I exhaled. The funny thing about grief is that it doesn't have an expiration date. You don't get over it. You just get used to walking around it. I spent the next few weeks doing odd contracting jobs for a few old clients who still trusted me. It was decent money, nothing fancy. I worked with my hands. Felt the ache in my shoulders again. Slept better at night. But part of me still felt restless. Like something was unfinished. So one afternoon, I drove out to my father's old house. Elliot hadn't touched it yet, maybe he didn't have the heart, or maybe he just didn't know what to do with it. But legally, it was his. I still had the spare key. The house smelled the same. Like cedar and dust. Like years of routines that no longer existed. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the shelves, the backs of doors. Everything was still there, his coat by the door, his boots by the back step, the old tape measure with a cracked casing in the kitchen drawer. In the basement, I found the box. It was tucked behind the water heater, sealed in duct tape. Dust-covered and forgotten. I pulled it out and sat on the concrete floor, the smell of oil and rust thick in the air. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. None of them mailed. They were written on yellowing paper, some dated 10, 15 years ago. Some more recent. Some full pages, others just a line or two. I'm not sure how to tell you what I'm carrying. I see pieces of myself in you, and that scares me. I wanted to fix it. I just didn't know where to start. But one letter hit me hardest. It was dated 8 months ago, the same month he rewrote the will. If you're reading this, then I've probably already failed you. Again. I tried to do right by both of you. I tried to divide the burden evenly. But fairness doesn't feel like love when it's measured out with a calculator. I wanted to be a father. I ended up being a ghost. I sat there for a long time. And for the first time since the funeral, I cried. Not just for what I lost. But for what he lost too. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It had no return address. Just my name in neat, steady handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. From Elliot. You were right about Eastwell. I shut it down. Corman took the hit, but I won't fight the fallout. I deserve it. I told myself I was building something my father would have respected. But the truth is, I was just trying to win the race I thought I'd already lost. I didn't grow up with him. But you did. And for what it's worth, I think he loved you in ways he didn't know how to love me. I hope you find peace. I never responded. Some stories don't need a reply. Some just need to end.